Rashidilek, everyone. So, as was requested by Tibet, Moscow, and the Russian group, with whom I have very close association and friendship for many, many years, right at the time when I was translating for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and then later on, after my becoming the director of library, they continued to invite me. So I visited your country many times. So I'm very happy to at least meet you online. Because of the marvel of technology, these days people are now talking more and more about virtual reality, which is almost like the reality. Now they are also talking about metaverse, where you can sit with your family members and have dinner. I mean, it's virtual, but it really looks like you are having lunch and dinner with your families, and you are able to buy huge land and a very fancy car and drive around. So in a way, these are all illusion, but in a way, with the marvel of technology, we are able to do many good things also. So thanks to technology that we are able to do all this, conversations and talks online without having to spend much time and much money. You can just, in the comfort of your own house, you're able to participate and listen to it. That is the good part of it. Yes, of course, there will always be some differences between doing a virtual talk or a physical talk. There may be some differences, but I think it's good enough. There's one thing. Then secondly, when I accepted to try my best to explain this, I have not accepted it because I'm a great scholar on Mahayana Sutra Alamkara. But, as Shantideva said, and also Dignaga right in the beginning, he said that I have composed this text not because thinking that it will benefit many people, but it will benefit people of similar, status. But I will add one more word and say that even if it does not help, I'm sure it will not harm. So therefore, even if it is of some benefit, some people, it is really, really good. Because we are talking about Dharma, we are not talking about money, we are not talking about politics. We are really talking about how to get a long-lasting peace and happiness. That is the key thing. So right at the outset, I want to tell you that this text, Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, is a very, very precious text. And also, as was introduced, this also is a lengthy text. And the verses are quite compact. And it is really difficult to do justice to translate these compact Tibetan verses into English. When you translate it, almost, unless you do almost like a prose kind of translation, it almost is difficult to make sense. Seizing this wonderful opportunity for my own study and practice, I have slowly started translating the root texts, and already translated, I think, 7-8 chapters. And that is primarily for my sake. And then by doing this, I learned it is not easy because of different, syntax and, ways of presenting things. But anyway, so what I'm trying to say is, you can study Buddhism not only for the rest of your life, but for many lives to come. Just like any other subject, there is no limit, no end to it. Okay, so we can study Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, and we can study Ornament of Realization and all the other 3, treatises of Maitreya, the famous 5 treatises of Maitreya, and so forth. There are so many precious texts that we can study. But what I really want to tell you, and I hope you will keep this in your mind, is that, as I've always been saying, If you are thirsty, you need to drink water, but not necessarily the whole ocean. I'm saying this based on my own experience. There may be many, many, many things that you study, which is of course good. It will offer some benefit. But unless you really understand it properly, develop personal conviction, and then implement and practice it, it will be not much benefit for you and for others. To be honest, I've seen many so-called scholars who had spent not just few hours online teaching, but who spent their, the many years, like 13, 20, 14, 15 years, rigorously studying this major text through a philosophical discussion, and they know a lot about the ins and outs of this difficult text as far as explaining and interpreting is concerned. But unfortunately, this is a fact that many of them who are very, very well versed, but their mind, status of their mind is almost like before, not much change. And in some cases, worse. I'm not talking about everybody. There are, of course, good practitioners who really like become disciplined person, kind person, compassionate person. But I'm talking about those also who do not change at all after all the expertise and knowledge, after all the information. And then there are a few cases who, instead of becoming more compassionate, they would become more proud and arrogant. Just like, people, when they don't have any money or wealth, they are fine, nice people, like ordinary people in villages, maybe in Russia or anywhere, They're basically quite simple, quite honest, quite nice. But when suddenly they become wealthy and rich, then they become arrogant, you see. So it's nothing but a human tendency. When we get more education, more knowledge, when we get more wealth, more name, more fame, then we tend to become proud and arrogant, you see. Some of the world leaders who are ruling us today, they may be nice people when they were ordinary person, but when they become leader, some of them become really very unruly, bringing so much, atrocities and difficulties for people. So based on this observation, what I want to tell you right now, right in the beginning, and I will be reminding this again and again, is number one, I may not be able to explain everything. We don't have time. I don't have the knowledge and expertise. And you may also have difficulty in understanding the language because this has to be translated, things like that. But here and there, some of these important teachings which will really help you become more compassionate, more kind, more tolerant. So just stick to those teachings, those lines of teachings, and try to practice it. And if you do that, then you are really, really taking the essence out of materials ornament of realization. And then, I'm also collecting some merit by explaining this, and you are also making your life meaningful. Now, this kind of mental transformation is not a luxury. It is not a luxury. It is a necessity, as has been clearly shown during this pandemic. The one thing that will really help you in all times, in all situations, is your integrity and your strength of mind. The rest, wealth, name, fame, even relatives and friends, however good they are, they may not be able to help you. Not necessarily because they are bad, but because they are outside of us. And what is outside of us, what is external to us, will not be able to give you that long-lasting peace and happiness. That is the bitter truth, whether we like it or not. So we need to change this mental attitude and habit of thinking that my long-lasting happiness and peace will come from outside. We need to slowly, by studying Dharma, we need to change it. We need to realize oneself. Who am I? What is my actual nature? What is the meaning of happiness? How can I really get it? How much is this is dependent on your mental attitude? You need to clearly understand that. Then you live your life in such a way that you have total freedom of undertaking those practices. And as much as possible, distance yourself from all those hindrances and obstructions and those environment which is not conducive for your physical health and also for your mental health. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, as always, is right in saying that many of the sufferings that we are experiencing today in this world are unnecessary suffering. Unnecessary suffering means if you change your way of thinking and attitude a little bit, you will not suffer. You don't have to suffer. But because of our arrogance, because of our stubbornness, because of our strong addiction to negative ways of thinking, negative ways of life, we continue to suffer. So it is basically our own doing. Like, for example, if you have kind of some disagreement with somebody, there is two ways of solving it. So one, just as that other person is angry, you should also become angry. Don't practice patience, remain stubborn, resistant, then see what is the result. This is what is happening in many levels between people, between countries. Both sides are stubborn. They're not like flexible. They never try to understand each other. Then the end result is conflict, destruction, things like that. So we need to develop this understanding that there's nobody who don't have a problem, who don't make mistakes. Making mistakes, having problem is part of the deal, part of life. So with that understanding, we need to understand other people's situations, other people's conditions, right? And then with that understanding, the fact that they are in the samsara, they're not Buddha, they're not enlightened, which means they are not perfect, which means they will make mistakes, just like small kids. So when they make mistakes, you should be there to help them. And even if you are unable to help, don't make the situation worse, right? So this is, of course, easier said than done, but there's no other choice, right? So our responsibility and duty as a human being or as a practitioner of a particular religion, or in this case, Buddhism, is that we are here to, bring together what is falling apart, right? Mending what is tearing apart. Like, for example, even small things like when your cloth is, broken, then it's your duty to stitch it, put it together. So similarly, when the society is breaking, just like sewing the clothes together, putting together, our job is to bring the society having problem together, not to further estrange it. So these are really like common sense things. So my main point is to say that if you really understand reality, the many aspects of reality, of nature, of yourself, of other people, of environment, understand it properly. You call it impermanence, you call it interdependent origination, whatever you want to call it. Once you understand all these aspects of reality, then naturally you will come to the senses there we are basically struggling together, traveling together in a turbulent boat. It's really like traveling in a turbulent boat. When you are traveling in a turbulent boat, when you and the fellow passengers' life is at risk, then at such a time, it doesn't make any sense to have enmity towards each other, to fight among each other. So the only alternative left, only common sense thing is that to be nice, to say the prayer together, to stick together, right? So there are many examples like that. So therefore, as much as possible, we should, by reading this text, we should, at least one thing that we should try to do is strengthen your loving kindness. That is the focus of this whole subject that we are going to study. And this term, loving kindness, is a term that comes from Maitriya's name. Maitreya means loving kindness. Maitreya Buddha. In many of his lives, Maitreya was like very loving, very kind, helping everybody. And therefore, then he was given the name Maitreya. And some of the great Buddhas and teachers, they said, your name is Maitreya. And for many lives, your name will be Maitreya. In the future, when you become Buddha, your name will be Maitreya Buddha. This is a beautiful thing, the name, loving kindness. Maitreya. So, even if you don't read the whole text, if you specialize on this, please do specialize on this. What is loving kindness? From Buddhist perspective, from the perspective of other religion, from your own personal experience, and develop precise conviction on the importance of this. You will be, if you practice that, you will be totally different person, happy person, kind person. That's 100% sure. If we don't try to get essence like that, okay, we can read all the text, the verses are difficult, we'll try to explain it, then you might make more effort, you may be able to understand the meaning, you may be able to interpret it. So what? Let me tell you a story. There at one point there was a person, gentleman. He was observing another gentleman who was counting a flock of sheep, hundreds of sheep. He was counting in the morning, in the evening also he's counting. Then this gentleman asked that since you have to look after all this flock of sheep and count them in the morning, count them in the evening, you have so many, so you are a very rich man. Then this other person who was looking after the flock of sheep, he said, I count all this in the morning to make sure that they go to the grassy area in the mountain. Then in the evening when they come back, I count to make sure that they are all there. But I don't have even a single sheep. I am a servant of somebody. So we will become like that. We can count all these things that is taught in Sutra Alamkara. He said this, he said this, he said this, like a messenger, Then if somebody says, okay, now you have studied Maitreya, so, Sutra Alamkara, and you are able to count all these different verses and the meanings in it. So which of this quality you have? Then you will say, I have none. I'm simply counting. So that's really a fact. That's not only in the case of Buddhist study, but in our other educational fields also, that you must become good in one thing at least. If you become good in one thing, expert in one thing, that will help you become expert in other areas also. Otherwise, you will become jack of all, as we say, jack of all, master of none. That will be not of much benefit. So my request right in the beginning is, by citing this verse, which I want to translate. There is one verse from Maitreya's prayer where it says, through my meditation on the three types of loving kindness, through my continuous meditation on the three types of loving kindness, may I be able to control the evil forces through loving kindness. May I be able to look after all sentient beings by loving kindness. May I get the auspiciousness of loving kindness of the Maitreya Buddha. It's a beautiful verse. So before I forget, I also want to tell you that Maitreya is somebody who had received teaching from Buddha Shakyamuni, who was he had so much respect to Buddha Shakyamuni that he used to visualize Buddha on his crown all the time. And later on, his other fellow practitioners saw that there is a stupa of enlightenment on the head of Maitreya as a sign of his great devotion to Buddha Shakyamuni. Right, so these days also there is this tradition of constructing Maitreya's statue with that stupa of enlightenment on his head. And when Buddha, it was Buddha's time to come to the human world to give the teaching, then the devas, the individuals in the Deva Loka, the celestial realm, they were filled with sadness that now since you are going, who will take care of us in the realm of the God? Then Maitreya was appointed as the regent of the Buddha. Right? And then it is prophesied that in the future, the next Buddha will be Buddha Maitreya. So next means not 1,000 years, but many, many years after. Right now we have already the Buddha Shakyamuni's period of the teaching is 5,000 years, out of which we have already spent more than 2,500 years. So as the time goes, people's merit, people's luck will decline, their age limit will also decline, and so forth. So in this way, it takes a long time, and a time will come when the longest age of a person living will be 10 years old. So it is around that time, it is said that the Maitreya Buddha will come and give the teaching, right? So there are a lot of interesting stories like that. And then Maitreya Buddha is said to be somebody who had cultivated bodhicitta in front of many, many countless Buddhas in countless eons. So some of this, when we talk about eons, it is of course difficult for us to digest. Okay. But that is what it said in the text. But what is important is when we read the text, then we will know these teachings are really, really amazing. And then one thing that we need to understand is Maitreya was not a human being. He was a godly being, or the English terms, I don't know, God or Deva, but whichever we want to use, he was not a human being, a celestial being. Both Manjushri and Maitreya, the two foremost upholder of the teaching of the Buddha. And Maitreya is primarily responsible for spreading the extensive conduct lineage. So that is what he taught in the ornament of realization Abhisamaya Alamkara, which is studied by monks in the major monastic universities for at least minimum 8-9 years. Right? How this great five treatises, I mean, imagine, is written or taught by somebody, a god, not the big god, but a celestial being with very high spiritual realization. Then how did these five treatises come into the human realm? This came into the human realm because of Asanga. Now there are commentaries on this root text of Maitreya, which some say is composed by Asanga, which some say it is composed by his younger brother Vasubandhu. But anyway, the story is like that. The mother of these two brothers, Asanga and Vasubandhu, she was a Brahmin, a very devoted religious Brahmin. And she was very worried about the degeneration of the Buddha's teaching. And she wanted to uphold it. And he said, I being a woman, I may not be able to do everything. So then she intentionally made this prayer. And then this Asanga and Vasubandhu were born from a king and from another, I think, Brahmin. So when these boys, when they asked her what is their responsibility? What is the responsibility or work of their father? Then he said, I have not produced you to continue the work of your father, but I've given birth to you so that you are able to uphold the teaching of the Buddha. It's a very powerful story, the role played by that woman, very powerful story. And then both of them are like now in the Buddhist circle, these two are like Asanga, he's really the trailblazer, the pioneer of the mindfulness school of thought. Just as Nagarjuna is the pioneer or trailblazer of the Madhyamika school of thought. Okay? And then, according to some of the texts, they say that now how these 5 treatises came into the human world. Asanga meditated and visualized in the cave for many years to get a direct guidance of Maitreya so that he can receive his teachings. So he spent first 3 years, no visible sign. Then he came out thinking that it is not possible. Then the entrance of the cave, he saw an old man who, by using soft cotton or soft cloth, polishing long iron bars, iron tubes. And then when Asanga asked, what are you doing? He said, I'm preparing needles from these long iron tubes. Then Asanga said, almost like, are you lunatic? Something like that, how are you going to do that? He said, if people make the effort, there's nothing that you can't achieve. See, these are needles I made. He showed him some needles he already made. Then Asanga thought, oh, this means then my effort is very weak. He went back to the cave, meditated another 3 years, 6 years. He came out, 6 years, no visible sign of Maitreya. He came out. Then again at the entrance, he saw that water drops coming from the upper ceiling of the cave on the floor, and the drops had made holes in the rock. So by seeing this, he thought, if the soft waters can make holes in the rock, then it means my effort is very weak. He again went back, 9 years, no visible sign. Then he came out thinking that now it is not possible. Then again at the entrance of the cave, he saw pigeons, who were hovering there. So every time they fly in and out, they used to rub their, soft feathers against the rock, and the rocks had really smoothened. So by seeing this, then he thought, my effort is very weak. So he went back, 12 years, no visible sign. Then he came out, left the cave, started walking all the way down. And then at some distance, he saw female dog. The upper half, all right, but the lower half is already maggot-ridden, it's eaten by worms and things like that. But the upper half is like very angry and barking, at him. So by seeing this, Asanga developed a very special, powerful compassion, thinking that this is the situation of the sentient beings, Your half body is almost gone, but still you are so angry, so nasty. So then he thought of helping that, maggot-ridden dog, how to remove the worms from the body of that dog. And then he thought the best way is to cut flesh from his own leg and put it in one place, and then take all the worms from there by licking with his tongue, and then putting it on the meat of his body, so that it cures the female dog and also does not make the worms die. So as soon as he closed the eye and tried to lick the worms out, there was nothing. His tongue was not able to touch anything. And then when he opened his eye, and then right in front of him, there is Maitreya standing with all his lustrous, body. radiating body. Then Asanga said, yeah, he was a little bit displeased because he meditated for 12 years and no signs were there. He said, oh, Maitreya, your compassion is very big. Then Maitreya said, it is not my lack of compassion, it is because of your not being able to completely purify yourself, your lack of compassion. Now you have shown such compassion to this dog. So therefore you are able to purify your obscuration and you are able to see me. And if you don't believe me, then you just carry me on your shoulder, on your back, and go to the marketplace and tell people that I'm carrying Maitreya on my back and see the reaction. So he did this. Nobody is able to see Maitreya on his back. But Asanga was shouting, saying that Maitreya is on my back, and people were saying, look, now he's been meditating for so many years, now he's crazy. Like that. So the point, so then there is this story of finally Asanga able to go to heaven, the residence of Maitreya, and receive this teaching from Maitreya during a short time, breakfast time, something like that. So there you can read, do this comparative study. In the quantum physics, they have a explanation about the twin paradox. So this is exactly similar what is explained in the quantum physics, the twin paradox, and this one, Maitreya going up into Maitreya's realm in heaven just for a breakfast time and receive all these 5 treatises. And when he came back, already 50 years of human life have gone. In the twin paradox in quantum physics, they say somebody the twin went up, and when he came back, short time, when he came back, 20 years have passed away. It's very similar. So these are interesting. There was no science, nothing at the time, right? So this is one thing that I just wanted to introduce. And then Asanga was also somebody who was really like professed by Buddha of his coming and preserving the teaching and so forth. So therefore we should make it our great effort to spread loving kindness, practice loving kindness, right? If we do just that, then we don't need to have so many sessions also, really. That's more than enough, okay? So do that. And so therefore, because of this possibilities of, if we are not able to get enlightened or reach higher spiritual realization during the teaching era of Buddha Shakyamuni, then it is said that you will be, if you now pray to Maitreya, read his 5 treatises, develop loving kindness, and so practice 6 perfections and so forth, then during the time of Maitreya, you will be born as one of his important followers and will be able to achieve higher realizations. So again, this may not be very easy for us to digest. Okay, we are talking about many, many eons. Forget about many eons. It's difficult for us to believe, the next life also. So even if you have difficulty believing that, but one thing that is not at all difficult to see is the efficacy of loving kindness. How much loving kindness needed in today's world, in your daily life, As I already cited these words, the way to destroy any obstruction, any evil force is loving kindness. The way to bring harmony, encouragement, and help to other helpless sentient beings is also development of loving kindness. I mean, look at the relationship between the parents and the kids. How human life came into being with love, with kindness. A later part of your life, when you become old and not able to look after yourself, at that time also one thing that's really, really important is others' affection, others' love, not so much money, not so much, name, fame, and so forth. Our very physical body is very, very suitable for loving kindness. Constant hugging, constant touching, constant petting each other. It's very good for us. right? So to be gentle with nature, with other people, is the key for solving all problems. As I used to recite the statement from other scholars, where they say, love is a quality which the blind can see and the deaf can hear. You see, even if you're deaf, you can feel love expressed by other people. Even if you're blind, you're able to feel that. You see, such a powerful thing, such a powerful thing, right? It is really one that nurtures it, right? So that's why normally the beautiful, example that's given is we must prepare equanimity, mental equilibrium towards everybody, just like preparing the ground for cultivating something. For cultivating something, you need to first prepare the ground, make it even, fertile. So equanimity means not having too much attachment to some and not having too much hatred to others. That's equanimity. That must be there with everybody. Once that preparation of the ground is done, once you've developed this equanimity, then that equanimity must be moistened by loving kindness, just as you would moisten that ground, that field that you have prepared. You need to put water to moisten it. And once you have prepared the ground, the field, and then moistened it with water, here in this case, loving kindness, then you need to plant the seed. Here in the spiritual practice, seed means the seed of compassion. Then from this seed of compassion, the sprout of bodhicitta will arise. It's a beautiful analogy, beautiful example, right? So therefore, to develop this loving kindness, we need to develop this equanimity towards all sentient beings. The so-called your friends and relatives today may have been your sworn enemy in the past lives, right? The so-called your enemy today may be your bosom friends, relatives in the past. There is no certainty in life, no certainty in life. There may be somebody who you love so much, with whom you feel a very strong closeness today. But because of slight different usage of word, that person might get angry and become your enemy tomorrow. There is no definiteness, right? So therefore it is not wise to develop too much attachment to some and too much disliking to others, right? So that must be there. Because if you do that, as I referred with the example of the field, if you do that, then it means your mind will become uneven, lopsided. When your mind is uneven, how are you going to moisten it with loving kindness? How are you going to plant the seed of compassion? And without loving kindness and compassion, how are you going to cultivate the precious bodhicitta, which is one of the most important cause for enlightenment? How are you going to cultivate it? And whoever they are, the so-called enemy or so-called friend, whoever they are, from their side, there is nobody who doesn't want happiness. So all sentient beings are exactly same in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering, right? So with this kind of understanding, we should try to prepare the ground and moisten it with a loving kindness. So that loving kindness can be developed in relation to, just as with compassion, we talk about three types of compassion. Compassion focusing on sentient beings, compassion focusing on the impermanent nature of sentient beings, and compassion focusing on the lack of inherent existence of sentient beings. With all these characteristics of sentient beings, you can develop compassion. So similarly, you can develop loving kindness. You can develop loving kindness to sentient beings means by seeing sentient beings fully afflicted by suffering, you develop loving kindness. By fully understanding their impermanent, fragile nature, you develop loving kindness. By seeing their lack of inherent existence, but still grasping onto independent existence, you develop loving kindness. So these are the different ways and means. And that's why when we talk about the four immeasurable quality also, loving kindness is one of the four important features of these four immeasurable qualities. May all sentient beings meet with happiness and the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings without suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings meet with that happiness which is without suffering. May I be able to abide in equanimity towards all sentient beings. Right? So, in this life, in order to cultivate that karma to be able to get the guidance of Maitreya in the future, in this life it is important to, if possible, construct images of Buddha or buy an image of Buddha and pray to him, and then recite the Maitreya prayers. There are many Maitreya prayers composed by many teachers. There is particularly one which is found in the, which is taught by Buddha himself, whose English translation is also available. So if you have that, recite it. If you want, let me know and I'll send it. Then you can translate it into Russian, recite it. So some of these homeworks we have to do. Just receiving, teaching, talking is not much use. We, from our side also, from today onwards, meditate on loving kindness, recite those prayers, become more closer to Maitreya, so that then you will be able to, develop the understanding of Maitreya's teachings. And in this way, you should also share the qualities of Maitreya to other people, share his teaching to other people, right? That's important. And from the point of view of the practice of Lamrim, the root text of Lamrim, or the path to enlightenment, is the Wisdom Perfection Sutras. And the text which explains this Wisdom Perfection Sutras in terms of the stages of the path is the ornament of realization, Abhisama Alamkara, composed by Maitreya. Then, especially for our practice, he has composed this Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, where the important points are highlighted for our practice. And then, of course, it is explained in a more extensive way, picked up some of the most important points to practice, and then explained it a little bit in detail. So that is Mahayana Sutra Alamkara. Then we have the Madhyanta Vibhanga, distinguishing the middle and the end, where Maitreya explains primarily the practice of calm abiding and special insight. Then there is also the distinguishing of the Dharma and Dharmata, which talks primarily about some of the views of Nagarjuna and so forth. And based on that, then we have the Mayana Uttara Tantra, Lama, which is another important extensive text. So when we used to study the Abhisama Alamkara, then so many citations and quotations come from Uttara Tantra and also from Sutra Alamkara. So it is because of this I'm a little bit familiar with these texts. All right, so this is a little bit about the Maitreya. And okay, then this is a piece written by somebody, which I will read. The text is organized into 5 parts, and it is the progress of topics through these 5 that constitutes the author's discursive intent. The first part, or the first step, is to convince readers of the text that the Mahayana teachings are valid. Of course, we'll read about this in detail later on. There are many people, even these days, there are people who say Mahayana teaching is not something taught by Buddha. Okay, this is Hinduism, some people say like that. So the first step is to convince readers of the text that the Mahayana teachings are valid, that they are Buddha Dharma. So this is explained in part 1, chapter 1 and chapter 2. Next, the intent is to convince readers of the superiority of the Mahayana. The word superiority may or may not be good, but a better quality of the Mahayana, so as to instill enthusiasm for it. So this is explained in part 2, which is covered in chapters 3, 4, 5, and 6. The author then explained the meaning of the key concepts as part of the intellectual grounding of the Mahayana that forms the part 3, which is explained in chapter 7, 8, and 9. Then the result of the practice. So this is what I'm saying. This is so good, When we practice, there must be some result. So here also it talks about the practice, the result of the practice. Then the result of the practice, the goal of the perfect full awakening, that means Buddhahood, is described in part 4, chapter 10, only one chapter. And finally, the path of the practice. That's important. If you want to get the fruit, you need to practice the path, which has to be explained in more detail. So it's described in full, part 5, and then it is in chapter 11 to chapter 21, the rest of the chapters. So this is kind of the style of this particular text. Okay, then to go to the root text, first, this text is called Mahayana Sutra Alamkara. That means ornament of sutras. So ornament of sutra basically means sutras refers to all the sutras taught by the Buddha. So all the sutras taught by Buddha are of course perfect, right? But for us to understand, it is important that it should be elaborated more clearly, more precisely. So this is what is done by this Maitreya's composition of Sutra Alamkara. Therefore, this is called ornament of sutra. Okay, Alamkara means ornament. So ornament can be, of different types. One ornament is to beautify it. Another is to make it more clear. So there are different types of ornaments. Okay. So the first verse of the first chapter is basically talking about that the Mahayana teaching is incontrovertible. It is non-deceiving. Okay. And what do we mean by Mahayana? And what is purpose of such a teaching, such a text? So this is explained in the first chapter. And the first verse, this is my translation, which may or may not make sense, but my translation, English translation, strictly according to the Tibetan style. So that's why I'm saying it may not make much sense in English. So, but for your understanding, according to what is written there in Tibetan, it basically says, when we talk about ornament of Sutra Alamkara, ornament of Sutra, how this is becoming an ornament? In what sense? For whom? So this is answered in this verse 1, which it says, one who knows the meaning. Meaning that who is ornamenting it? Meaning, who is ornamenting it means this is ornamented by Maitreya. So therefore, who is Maitreya? Maitreya is somebody, one who knows the meaning. It's only somebody who knows the meaning that he can explain it. He can make it clear. So therefore, number one is the one who has ornamented is Maitreya, who knows the meaning. The second point is to whom this ornament is put there. To properly teach it. To properly teach it. That means to properly teach the Mahayana teaching. It is by properly teaching the correct meaning that you are able to ornament the words and the meaning of the sutra. Third, by what method you are ornamenting it? The method is by stainless speech and words. The speech and the words that is used here is such that the speech is one that possesses 8 features, and the word is stainless. This is also written there in the text. So the speech with 8 branches means a speech which will be understood in the big towns and cities. And it is attractive in terms of intonation, for the listeners. And it's clear. It's not shuffled. And it's explained with examples, well-known examples, through that people are able to understand it. And a speech which is proper to listen, because it is by listening to such a speech, such a teaching, that the 3 poisons can be eliminated. Then it is also called baseless, because such teaching is called baseless in the sense that this teaching is not based on the motivation to get some wealth or name and fame. Without consideration to name and fame, the teaching is given. And this teaching is such that it is not unnecessarily trying to repudiate others. And this teaching is given with great confidence, because Maitreya knows the meaning. So these are the 8 features of the speech. So perfect speech. And then with the word also, word possessing 8 features. Meaning that the word is valid, there's no contradiction between what is said earlier and what will be said in the later. It is in accordance with the major treatises. Its order is not shuffled. It is easy to understand, and it is suitable to one's mind, and it is beneficial for many lives to come, and it is something that will produce delight in your mind. So these are the features in terms of the way by which it is ornamented. Okay. Then the next 4th point related to this ornamenting is, for whose purpose you are ornamenting it? For removing suffering. For removing suffering means for if you say for whose purpose you are ornamenting it, it is ornamented to remove the sufferings of sentient beings, grosser and subtler sufferings of sentient beings. So that's the meaning of for removing sufferings. by its nature of compassion for suffering sentient beings. Right? Because you wish to remove their sufferings, because you have this compassion to remove sufferings of sentient beings. And for what this ornament is ornamented means this is ornamented by the for teaching the Mahayana aspect. That means by explaining the 7 features of the Mahayana teaching, that this is being explained. So the 7 features of the Mahayana is that the object is great because it is focusing on extensive sutras. Its practice is great because it is fulfilling the purposes of oneself and others. It is primordial wisdom is great because through this one is able to realize both the selflessnesses, the selflessness of person and the selflessness of the phenomena. Great perseverance or great effort. Because of this Mahayana practice, you don't get tired or defeated, even if you are to make effort for 3 countless eons. And then it has the greatness of having great skill. That means you are able to live in the samsara with other sentient beings without letting yourself afflicted by afflictive emotions. So this is a great skill. So that great skill is another feature. And then the greatness of the sublime activity. Greatness of sublime activity means the activities that is taught in Mahayana teaching is such that it will fulfill the purposes of all the 3 lineages of the Sarvaka, Upatika Buddha, and Mahayana. And then finally, great in terms of fruit, because finally, by practicing Mahayana, you are able to actualize the 4 bodies of the Buddha, or the 2 bodies of the Buddha, the Dharmakaya and Rupakaya. Okay. So for sentient beings who travel by this Dharma teaching. Now the next one is for whose purpose this is ornamented means this is explained by this line saying for sentient beings who travel by this Dharma. Because that means who wants to follow Mahayana teaching and with that wants to travel to the state of enlightenment and work for the benefit of sentient beings. So it is primarily for these people. This is ornamented. And then the last feature out of the 8 features, the last feature is, since your ornament, this is ornament to sutra, so how many different types of ornaments you're using by which you are going to ornament it? So this is explained in the next verse, the 2nd verse. For sentient beings who travel by this Dharma teaching, teaches the nature of unsurpassing proper meaning of 5 aspects. The 5 aspects, 5 types of ornaments by which you are going to ornament the sutra. What are these 5 aspects? They're explained in verse number 2. Okay, so we stop here today.
Thank you very much, Geshe. Dear friends, I understand that it's probably difficult at the very first session to have questions, but if you have
You can ask any other questions,
Yeah, if you have no questions, it's actually no problem. We can, Geshe, what do you think?
Yeah, if no question, it's good. They can also ask other questions, not necessarily related to this teaching,
Yeah.
They have some other burning questions.
While people are just thinking of questions, there were some requests. You gave us homework to read prayers to Maitreya, right? Could you please send us the English or the name of the prayer?
Sure, I'll send it to you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Just a moment. I can see there are some. So Geshe, would you give us some assignments, or maybe we need to prepare somehow to your sessions, maybe to read something, or maybe you will give us some tasks?
The task, as I said, is reflect more on the process of cultivation of loving kindness and how to cultivate it. Okay. And based on your own personal experience, how important is genuine loving kindness, not the ordinary, attachment, but genuine love without attachment, how important it is. Think about that. That's good enough. Okay. Then, if you have more time, think about the meaning of Mahayana. Now, when we talk about Mahayana, the word Mahayana is used in terms of both the philosophical tenet system and also in terms of the cultivation of the path in one's own individual mental continuum. So these are a little bit two different things, okay? Right? So therefore, Tsongkhapa in his great stages of the path says that it's not enough that the teaching is Mahayana teaching. The person should become Mahayana, right? So you become, in terms of your practice, you become a genuine Mahayana when you cultivate bodhicitta, the wish to become Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. So think about that and see how much of that bodhicitta is there within you, or how much altruism is there with you, right? And why this mind of bodhicitta, wishing to become Buddha, is such an important mind? Is it possible for us to cultivate it? Or is it at least possible for us to come closer to it? And by doing so, what will be the, we can say what will be the day-to-day benefit, or, year-to-year benefit, or life-to-life benefit. So these are like something that you can think. It's important to think, not enough just to listen to somebody and say, yeah, oh, good, yeah, important. That's not enough. One has to, as much as possible, develop some kind of conviction, the truth and the efficacy of those practices. It has to, as I always say, Buddhism must make sense in today's world. So loving kindness that is taught in this text must make sense in today's world. Bodhicitta that is taught in this text must make sense in today's world, not only today's world, but must make sense in your own personal life. So think about that. There's plenty of things to think about.
Thank you very much, Geshe. And actually, we have some questions. Could you please explain the term Gotra? I think this question was already asked by someone during the teachings of His Holiness, but could you please explain a little bit again?
Yeah, there's a whole chapter on Gotra, which we are going to read later on. So reserve it for that, but there's no harm explaining a little bit. So this word Gotra, in Sanskrit it's called Gotra, but in English, different people have translated differently. So I don't know really. Some people translators, they use the word gene, Buddha gene. Then others have used it as Buddha class. Others have used it as Buddha family. Others have called it Buddha lineage, So basically, just like we have a family lineage, so similarly, it's a kind of Buddha's lineage, So the Gotra here means the capacity. Basically, Gotra here means the capacity to become Buddha. That's the Gotra, capacity to become Buddha. That capacity to become Buddha is said to be there not only in human beings, but in all sentient beings. And that capacity is the clear nature of the mind, unobstructed, clear nature of the mind. It has the potential. But because of our afflictive emotions, habituations with negative emotions, it is obscured. So when we undertake practice, what we are doing is we are uncovering the covering, just like, dusting the dust and make the mirror shine out, right? So the potential to become Buddha is the mind itself, which by nature does not have inherent existence, devoid of independent existence. That means it has a dependent, changeable existence. That means you can change that mind and move from that inferior situation to superior situation by cleaning it, purifying it, and then gradually you proceed through all the 5 paths and 10 spiritual grounds and become Buddha. That is the meaning. So the capacity, the potential, Gotra here means the capacity, the potential to become Buddha. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much, Geshe-la. Just a moment. There is a question. Geshe-la mentioned that Maitreya's Mahayana Sutra Alamkara belongs to the lineage of extensive practice. What
Yes.
does it mean? And how is it related to the lineage of profound view? How do the two lineages merge in one's practice?
Yes. So basically, if it is a teaching of the extensive conduct lineage, it doesn't mean that it will not teach profound or the shunyata. It will also teach shunyata. If it is the profound view, profound view lineage, like that of Nagarjuna, it primarily talks about the shunyata, emptiness. But it does not mean that it does not teach the extensive lineage also. Okay. So the extensive is so called because there it explains in detail about the 5 paths, 10 spiritual ground, the 6 perfections, and things like that. Whereas when we talk about profound lineage, as I said, it doesn't mean that it doesn't explain it, but the main focus is on explaining the shunyata, the profound. So that's the meaning.
Thank you, Geshe-la. There is one question. It's one of our English-speaking participants would like to clarify. Will you teach this text, Ornament of the Great Vehicle, Sutras, Maitreya's Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, with commentaries by Khenpo, Shenga, and Jumipam Maitreya texts? Is this version you are using for English or?
No, the one I'm using is, I'm not using any English translation. I'm using Tibetan text. So right now I am reading this Asanga or Vasubandhu's commentary, which is not a lengthy commentary. So it is there, on my table. So occasionally I look at it. And then I'm reading a commentary by a very good Tibetan scholar called Palmang Ponchok Gyaltsen. So I have that commentary. So I'm using that commentary. Plus, there is an also very good commentary by another great practitioner, whose also name is, something like Asanga, Thongme. But this Thongme is the one who wrote this 37 Bodhisattva practices. He's well known to be a Bodhisattva. So he is, luckily I had this text a long time with me, but I never read it, unfortunately. So this time I have started reading it. So I'm using this, primarily these 2 texts. And I don't have the time and the capacity to read so many commentaries. It's really confusing, right? Yeah, I heard about this other text commentaries also. Yeah.
Thank you, Geshe-la. The question from one of our Russian-speaking participants. Geshe-la, how can I weaken or overcome the attachments in my life?
Like, for example, by understanding the nature of the reality of the object with which you have attachment. Now, for example, I've actually explained this before many times during the teaching. This person who is asking the question may or may not have attended my teaching. I have given this example of, let us say, a very old sick person, 95 years old, let us say, 95 years old man, and also physically very sick. Body is covered with wounds, pus oozing out from those wounds, and lying on a bed, if there's such an old man sick. Will you develop attachment to it? Or will we develop attachment to it? I don't think so. Because you have now seen the reality. You've very vividly, clearly seen the reality. That is not worth developing attachment, but it is worth developing love and compassion. So interesting. When you see the reality, positive qualities can be generated. Negative, afflicted emotions will naturally diminish. That is at least my finding. That is how I think. Okay, so you will not develop attachment to it. So similarly, to that object to which you have a lot of attachment, be it your car, be it your husband, be it your wife, whatever it is, if you see their impermanent nature, impure nature, fragile nature, not only thinking once, but if you really think and understand it very, very properly, very precisely, the essencelessness of that object, then there will be not much room for attachment. Another example that I can put is, for example, the dew drops on a blade of grass early in the morning. They also look very nice, but you will not develop attachment to it because it is going to vanish in 2 seconds, right? So you will not develop attachment to it. We develop attachment to those things which we, because of our misunderstanding, which we tend to think that this is something that is going to be there for a long time. By living with this person, by living in this house, I'm going to get a lot of happiness. So you develop this permanence. So once you understand the fragility, the impermanent nature, then this will help you reduce your attachment. But how much reduction will be there is dependent on how strong is your practice. Therefore, Shantideva in his Bodhicharya avatar, he says, why a person who himself or herself is impermanent develop attachment to another person who himself or herself is impermanent. Similarly, he said, why a person who himself or herself is impermanent develop hatred to a person who himself or herself is impermanent. So both in terms of anger or attachment, all these negative emotions, there's no room for developing this, once you understand their impermanent, dreamlike nature. Okay.
Thank you, Geshe. And the next question is from Maria. How to practice non-evaluating mind?
Non-evaluating, but this English word, of course, you have to evaluate. It depends, One is like probably you are using the non-judgmental mind. Okay. So when you use the word non-evaluating, one, in order to, in Buddhism, we are very much encouraged to, in a way, evaluate. That means analyze, see the pros and cons. Like when we practice also, you need to see the pros and cons of compassion. Similarly, the pros and cons of attachment, And then through this evaluation and analysis, when you find that compassion is useful, then you cherish it and cultivate it. Through this evaluation or analysis, when you find attachment of no use, then you try to reduce it. So in that sense, we need to evaluate it. But if you are using this word in sense of judging other people, then it's not good. Who are you to judge other people? How much you understand, about other people? What is the benefit of judging other people, Somebody very correctly said, don't judge, don't judge other people. Because you have no idea how much effort that person has made this morning to just get out of his or her bed and come to the office. Meaning that this person may have been really, really suffering and having a lot of problems, you see. But because of the situation out of necessary for food, it may be great uphill task, very difficult, but they try to just get out of the bed and then, put on clothes and then join the crowd, pretending that nothing has happened. But it's not that nothing has happened. Deep down, they may be like full of problems, full of emotional upheavals and difficulties. So just by seeing that person, thinking that this person looks okay, if you make a judgment, that's wrong. This person has struggled much just to get out of the bed and come to the office. Yeah.
Geshe-la, next question is from Igor. He asks, what is the fundamental difference between the unity of method and wisdom in Sutra and Tantra?
In Sutra and Tantra, the method and wisdom are treated separately. Then the unity means the method and practice of method and wisdom supporting each other. Whereas in Tantra, the method and wisdom are seen as of same entity, not just supporting each other, but seen as same entity. Okay.
Thank you. And the next question is from Vladimir. Thank you, Geshe-la. What is the difference between the loving kindness and bodhicitta, wishing happiness for all beings?
Loving kindness is saying how nice if all sentient beings meet with happiness. That's it. How nice if all sentient beings meet with happiness. Bodhicitta says how nice if all sentient beings, how nice if I'm able to become Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. These are totally two totally different, mind. And loving kindness is one of the important cause for generation of bodhicitta. So comparatively speaking, we can say, bodhicitta is far advanced, much more stronger. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that we'll just hear some questions from our English-speaking participants. Miriam, please, you can unmute yourself.
Tashi Delay. I'm the one. Hi, I would like to get the text. And so while you've been talking, I've been searching for it. So I'm the one who asked, is this an appropriate text? And I can get it from Amazon.com. And it's Ornament of the Great Vehicle Sutras.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that an appropriate text to get so that I can follow along with you? Or do we not need to get a text?
No, you can get the text. We may have different translations, different sources, but basically they should come very close. So it is good. I know there are at least 3 different versions in English.
Okay, that's the only one I could find.
I have 2, but I'm not reading much.
Okay, is there a better one in English than this one? Otherwise, I'll get this one.
Which one?
The Ornament of the Great Vehicle Sutras, Maitreyas, and so on. The one that I wrote in the chat.
Which one?
Well, which English translation do you think is best?
I really don't know. I didn't get time to do a comparative study.
Okay, then I think I'm going to go ahead and get this one.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Tashi Delay.
Delay, yeah.
Okay, and just a moment. Vishal, you can unmute yourself.
Geshe-la, namaste.
Namaste.
I have a question. Are there occasions where love and kindness are not applicable? For example, how can I show love and kindness to a neighbor with whose methods I don't agree, and I may need to confront him and even take legal action against him? So how is love and kindness applicable in such a case of conflict? Thank you.
So there are different levels of loving kindness. When you reach a very high level of loving kindness, then it's no enemy. Whatever the behavior and the aggressiveness or whatever they do, You don't treat them as your enemy or something to oppose with. Okay, you will think that this is a different way of thinking, different way of doing things, but you will be there to help them, not to confront and challenge them in an aggressive sense. So that's a high level. But for ordinary people like us, yes, this is a challenge. So therefore, I tell them that when somebody unnecessarily commits certain wrong things to you, legally or illegally, then you have every right to defend yourself. But make sure that inside you don't maintain that hatred and anger. That's the point. Hate the sin and not the sinner. That's a great option left with us. Because if you challenge that wrongdoing without losing your loving kindness and compassion, in other words, maintaining your sanity, you will actually be able to do a better job than when you try to do it with, anger and so forth. Okay.
Thank you very much, Geshe-la. And maybe we can take just one last question from Saheli. But please mind the time because it's already late in Dharamsala. So Saheli, you can unmute yourself.
I'm Geshe-la. So I'm just telling my question very quickly. The thing is, you have mentioned that the lots of unnecessary sufferings we are having nowadays because of our own stubbornness and our own arrogance, and that's very true. I could totally see that all the sufferings I have gone through, it's because entirely for my own stubbornness and the arrogance. I try to replace the word arrogance with like firmness or my pride and all that. I try to justify all those things. And my question is it right view to see it as that suffering is part of life and I'm standing for my integrity? That's why all those conflictions has came, or try to think it is in this manner that I shouldn't be that stubborn in few cases. How to approach the right view in that?
The simple solution is you should never, lose the sight that you desire long-lasting happiness.
Okay.
Now, when you confront difficult situations, challenges, and so forth, and then if you are to deal with that, then you should think that if I take this stand, is it good for my long-lasting happiness? Is this going to contribute to my long-lasting happiness? That's the point. It's not so much about you are right or other person is right, who is wrong. That's not the point. The point is this going to contribute to my long-lasting happiness or to their long-lasting happiness? And with that understanding, then if there is a need to be a little bit soft, be soft. If there's a need to be a little bit firm, be firm, right? But again, as I said, most important thing is, as much as possible, not out of negative emotions.
Okay. Yeah. I totally got my answer. Thank you for that.
Thank you.